The state of today's media? Bias, bias, bias. It's not good. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. The American journalist under attack, media trust and democracy. Key findings 2022. That is the headline from a survey conducted over the years. It's conducted periodically by sociologists in conjunction with scholars at Indiana University and other places, and they basically interviewed journalists around the nation to determine, how do you feel about the state of media? How do you feel about job prospects going forward? How do you feel the media are being treated by politicians, by news consumers, and so forth and so on and so forth? And no surprise, the media lean left, right? We all know that. We all know that just intuitively, and maybe we know that by noticing just open bias in what we read and what we hear on radio or television news. But the numbers prove it too. The data prove it as well. Surveys and polls show that by and large, in the world of media in America, journalists vote Democrat. Journalists say they're independent but vote Democrat. Few, very few, and alarmingly growing even fewer over the last couple of years are those who vote Republican, who claim to be conservatives. And that's just a problem for the media. Why don't more conservatives go into media? Why don't more mainstream, legacy, left-leaning, supposedly unbiased media outlets hire conservatives? It just seems like it would do the country a world of good to have that variety of voices. But this is where we're at in America, and we know that's a rhetorical question, because we know why. We know that those who own corporate media, those who own legacy media, they don't want conservative voices out there. They've been corrupted by Marxists. They've been infiltrated by socialists and communists, and those are the only voices that they want to put out there. Before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at washingtontimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. If you do go to Washington Times to get Bold and Blunt, make sure and subscribe to my newsletter. It's Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. You get my podcasts that come out Tuesday and Thursday, as well as my commentaries that I write every day for the Washington Times, delivered right to your email box. All you have to do is enter your email address, and Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, those newsletters go out. I want to quickly mention as well my latest book. If you haven't picked up a copy, I would love it if you did. I have an Amazon authors page. Just go to Amazon and type in Cheryl Chumley Books, and my authors page will come up. But the latest one is called God-Given or Bust: Defeating Marxism and Saving America with Biblical Truths. I also have a new fiction series out there. The first book is available now. The fiction series itself is called Chloe's People. It's going to be a 5-part book series. Chloe is on my authors page. Hector is coming out, the second in the series, in the next couple months. So maybe you want to sign up on my authors page to get alerts for when my books come out, because they do come out now and again, and I would hate for you to miss them. So let's look at this survey, key findings from this. Most journalists, I'm going to read right from this. You can get it at theamericanjournalist.org. And just type in, do a search, 2022 findings. That's the latest available. Not much has changed. And they do it, as I said, periodically. Every few years they update. But you can count on this information still being pretty accurate. Most journalists say they are Democrats. Wow, what a shocker, right? Okay, compared with 2013, the American Journalist writes, the percentage of full-time U.S. journalists who claim to be Democrats has increased 8 percentage points in 2022 to about 36%. a figure higher than the overall population percentage of 27%, according to a 2022 ABC News/Washington Post national poll. This is the third highest percentage of journalists saying they are Democrats since 1971. I'm going to keep reading because this is very interesting. Journalists who say they were Republicans continue to drop from 18% in 2002 and 7.1% in 2013 to 3.4% in 2022. Holy cow. There are only 3.4% Republican journalists out there working in America's media. Unbelievable. This figure is notably lower than the percentage of U.S. adults who identified with the Republican Party, 26% according to the poll in 2022. About half of all journalists, or 51.7%, said they were independents. Okay, this is independence in ear quote, because journalists, and trust me on this, I've been in this field for, 30 years maybe. Trust me, journalists love to claim that they're independent. I'm independent. I'm independent minded. I register as an independent. But what they really are card carrying socialists, for crying out loud. I don't even want to say Democrats. Let's just skip right over and go right to the truer word here. They're socialists. If you look at what they represent, at what they believe in, there is nothing in there that shows independence, right? It's all marching order bullet points from the far leftists. They don't even identify with the Democrat Party. They are just far left of even the Democrat Party. If you look at the causes that they support, it's abortion after birth, for crying out loud. It's open borders, that there is no such thing as an illegal immigrant, because no individual, no person can be illegal. Everything that the Marxists of the world favor, that's what these independents of journalists favor. Trust me. I know firsthand. I've seen it up close and personal, from local, tiny newsrooms to larger newsrooms. Independent is code for Democrat voting. All right, back to this. About half of all journalists, 51.7%, say they were independents, which is about 12 percentage points above the figure for all U.S. adults, 40%. Overall, U.S. journalists today are much more likely to identify themselves as independents rather than Democrats or Republicans, a pattern similar to 2013. And then, this is great. I wish you could see this. I wish that this was a visual podcast today. I wish I was doing a video version, because this chart just tells it. I mean, it's a face smacker, okay? It just smacks you right in the face. The party affiliation has that the American Journalist just ran down by figures. They put it in a chart, and you can really see it, okay? 1971. It's got Democrat, Republican, Independent, and other. In 1971, 32.5% of journalists identified as independent, 25.7% of journalists in America identified as Republican, and 35.5% of journalists in America identified as Democrat. So that's a fairly decent split. Another 6.3% identified as other, libertarian, or who knows, card-carrying communists, whatever. But it's basically, a third. Again, Republicans are underrepresented in journalism, but not by that much, a few percentage points. And I would say, once again, that the independents back then probably voted Democrat, but probably not as viciously anti-American independent / voting Democrat as the ones today. So that was 1971, all right? Scrolling across, here we go. We drop in 1982 to 18.8% Republicans, 39.1% claim independence, so that jumped up by 7 plus percentage points, and 38.5% claim Democrat. Going across to the next one, 1992, again, bleeding Republicans in the American media. That number fell to 16.4%. Meanwhile, Democrats jumped 44.1%, independents 34.4%. Let's go to 2002. There's 3 more categories, and I'm going to read them all. Yes, because it's my podcast, because I can. So 2002, 32.5% identified as independent, 13.6% identified as other. That number jumped considerably, so I'm not sure what they mean by that. That just means people, they probably are those snarky type reporters that just, they look down their noses at the rest of America and they claim to be completely unbiased, completely independent, so independent that they don't even want to identify as independent. They just go right for the other category. So that's my suspicion there. 18% identify as Republican, 35.9% as Democrat. Are you seeing the trend here? Republicans just, I guess it jumped. It jumped in 2002 from 16.4% Republican to 18%. But that's not very high. Still minority. All right, here we go. 2013, big switch. Big change. 14.6% identify as other. Meanwhile, 50.2% identify as independent, right? Get that? Do the math there. We've got over 64% identifying as either independent or other. They have no political party at all. This is 2013, right? Barack Obama years. Barack Obama years when you had all the media fawning over Barack Obama with the trickle down the leg. What was that guy? CBS or whatever he was. He felt a tingle in his leg. Oh yeah, tingles. And all the media members out there just fawning and bowing down. But 64% of them were just other or independent. There was no political bias, nothing to see here. Go home, folks. Meanwhile, 28.1% said that they voted Democrat. And here we go. No surprise here. 7.1% Republican. 7.1% of America's media under Barack Obama in 2013 voted Republican. But it gets worse. Here's the last category, 2022, right? The other fell back to 8.5%. The independent jumped a bit to 51.7%. 51.7%, really, of journalists out there are independent-minded, independent voting, independent thinking, critically thinking. That means they have no bias, no political bias. They're just as open to Donald Trump as they are to Barack Obama. We're supposed to believe that 51.7% of journalists today, right, or 2022, are independent-minded, clearly without bias, willing to give President Trump the fairest of shakes, just as they're willing to look at Democrats in Congress and put them under the most watchdogged of lights. Please. All right. 36.4% say they vote Democrat, are Democrat-leaning. And here we go. Here's the sad and sorry. If you've been following the math, you can see what's coming. 3.4% of American journalists in 2022 said they voted Republican. That is sorry. Very, very sorry and sad. And this is why we have such a problem with America's media. And guess what journalists then turn around and do? They complain that they're not trusted. In this very same poll, in this very same survey, you've got journalists talking about one of their biggest issues was that they don't feel like they're trusted. Imagine that. Well, if we want to solve America's problems, I always say we need God in charge, right? God first, then country, God first, and then the political class. We all need to recognize that the war in America is the fight to retain God-given individual liberties and rights, and to make sure our elected leaders obey that dictate, right? Obey that phrase, and put themselves in secondary subservient roles to the people. That's what we got in this country called American exceptionalism. That's what founding fathers gave us when they penned the Declaration of Independence and spoke of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, endowed by our Creator, certain rights, unalienable rights, governments only being put in place to preserve and protect those inherent birthrights. That's called American exceptionalism. So that's the biggest problem in America, that we have failed to uphold that standard, and we think that with just the right president, with just the right political leadership, we'll have a country that's back on track. Well, that's true. Politics matters, but what matters more is individualism and individual rights as recognized by the Creator, and fighting for that first and foremost, no matter who's holding positions of political authority. That's the biggest battle. And when Christians take a step back from politics and culture and allow secularists to reign in those domains, then we get the problems we have in America right now, right? With an overburdensome government that thinks it's their job, their duty to provide from cradle to grave, feeding a mindset of people who come in illegally from other countries and demand that their government provide for them cradle to grave. And lost in the shuffle of government entitlement program is the idea of independence, rugged individualism, and God-given rights and liberties, meaning government stay subservient. Lost in the shuffle is that. So that is the biggest war in America. But the second biggest war, I gotta say, it's the media. It's the media, because the media is the fuel that feeds that big government narrative, that anti-American narrative, that open border, globalist elitism, government can do no harm, citizens shut your mouth and obey type of narrative. The media, propaganda has become its specific tool of choice. And look, these dictatorial countries, Marxist countries, communist countries know how important the media is. That's why they seek to control the media. That's why you have state-sponsored media in most of these other countries. In America, we're supposed to have a thriving independent media that does the watchdog digging and servicing for the American people, on behalf of the American people, not just serving as a mouthpiece for the government. That has gone by the wayside, really, except when you have Donald Trump in the White House, and then suddenly all these independents and others and Democrats in the media come alive and decide, well, it's time to get tough. It's time to start digging hard. It's time to get tough on our political coverage. Well, with only 3.4% of members of the media who claim to vote Republican or claim to have some sort of conservative leanings, and the rest are all Democrat/independent/other, meaning socialist-minded, communist-minded, Marxist-minded, I would say that that is the second biggest problem in America right now. Without truthful information flowing to the people, how do we know? How do the people know how to vote, how to fight effectively, how to get back and maintain the idea of God-given individual liberties and rights? If we don't know our enemies, how can we fight effectively? I have a great guest today, Roger Ream. He is president of the Fund for American Studies, and he speaks both eloquently and with great insights into what the problems are in today's media. I'm happy to say he is here on Bold and Blunt. Roger Ream, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is so great to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Cheryl. Thank you.
So, I wanted to talk a little bit about the piece you just wrote about the state of media in America regarding coverage of Donald Trump. Is President Donald Trump getting a fair shake from the media right now?
Well, I would say that I think things are improving over his first term. As as you will recall, in the first term, we had the Russian collusion hoax and a news media that was just working as a on an adversarial role on everything that President Trump tried to do in his first term. I think now there is at least change taking place in the media. It's a little too early to tell whether we could say he's getting a fair shake, but he's certainly changed things by mixing up the White House press corps. It's not quite as uniformly hostile to things he's trying to do. So, but I think the jury's still out on in terms of answering your question.
People have mixed views about what he did with the press corps in the White House, and I'm of the mind that it's a good thing. It's not just a good thing for his administration, but a good thing for all of America to open up the press corps to alternative viewpoints, alternative media. What do you say about that?
I agree with you 100%. I was just speaking a few weeks ago with Ari Fleischer, who was press secretary to President George W. Bush in 2001 and 2002. And he told me that at that time, he had someone on his staff check the voting registration of the members of the White House press corps, and it was 12-1 Democrat to Republican, a totally hostile press corps in 2001. And of course, as you know, it's only gotten worse during President Trump's first term, during the Biden term when they were covering up things such as the Hunter Biden laptop and the president's health problems. So I think mixing it up is a good thing, letting in sources of reporting that are now becoming much more important in our society, such as Substack columnists, podcasts, places like your Bold and Blunt podcast will be getting more information they can share with interested readers because of the changes that are taking place.
So the changes that we've seen over the last few months in some media outlets, firings and downsizing of staff at CNN, MSNBC, really the one that struck me as most surprising, Washington Post and Jeff Bezos looking to have a more libertarian or free market bent on their opinion pages. Are these changes, you think, born out of principle or more a pragmatic look at the administration?
I suspect it's more the latter, a pragmatic look at the administration. But at the same time, there's also, clear that the business model certainly for newspapers and even for cable channels isn't working. So I think they're just at a point where they have to try something new. It was interesting last fall when the LA Times, USA Today, and the Washington Post decided not to endorse candidates in the race for president. Now that may have been a pragmatic move on their part. But I also think perhaps that, some of these papers like the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos, he knows how to, he's a successful business person. He's done very well building businesses. And I think there's probably more to it than just a pragmatic interest in, but there's a mix. It's certainly a mix with him, and they have to make changes or the model just will fail.
So I've been in the field of news for maybe 30 years now, and I've seen many changes, as I'm sure you have as well, as president of the Fund for American Studies and hosting a journalism fellowship program. I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes come through your offices, but I wonder, what do you think are the most significant changes that have taken place in the field of journalism, both negative and maybe even positive?
Well, there have certainly been a lot. One thing is that, that traditional role of a journalist going out to gather information and write up a story has changed quite a bit. Nowadays, journalists, they carry their cell phone, they take video and send video reports in. They post things on social media. they have to be much more well-rounded to adjust to the current media landscape. There's much more of an immediacy in terms of what people want. It's much harder to write up a long story and then wait for it to get published a day or two later in the newspaper or in a magazine. That's been a challenge to the traditional newspaper. We've seen magazines that have gone under. I think there's a need for a different type of person to come out of journalism schools. And I'm not sure we've seen the changes in the journalism schools themselves to produce that type of person. As far as I can tell from what we've looked at, many of these prominent journalism schools have remained captured by the left, by the progressive woke left. They aren't offering anywhere near a traditional balanced journalism education. To the extent they teach economics at all, it usually has a very leftist bent to it. And economics is a very important subject for journalists to understand with virtually every issue they cover. So I think we still need the journalism schools to change, and I hope they will, or that media organizations will hire outside the journalism schools.
Do you think that there has been a trend at all of would-be journalists coming out of school? They go into the field of journalism, and instead of putting their time in at local levels and climbing the ranks, they just want that flashy, celebrity-driven White House job or something like that. Do you think that's become more the expectation of new graduates or those who want to go into journalism?
That certainly has. We used to recommend to students that they go, start working on the city desk or the police beat in some smaller market to get the kind of experience that they need in order to become a political reporter in the future or a national reporter. Not only do a lot of students coming out of journalism schools or as journalism majors not want to do that anymore, but there is less of a need for it. But I do think what's very important is for a young person to understand is basically nobody cares that much about your opinion. So don't expect to be writing opinion pieces and editorials right when you're out of college that anyone will be interested in reading. You need to learn how to report. And that's even true if you work on the opinion page. If you or I are going to pick up a paper and turn the opinion page, we want to get information. We don't just want opinion. So we stress that in our programs that, you should be a good reporter of things, even if you're writing an opinion piece. But I do think, there's so many more opportunities nationally now, Cheryl, that students don't really have to gain that kind of local experience as much. They can come to Washington, D.C. or New York and find positions where they can be writing for either the digital world or the traditional media, provided they're doing it effectively as a reporter of information.
I see part of the reason for that as being the 24/7 cycle of news that we have now. Cable stations need people to fill those slots. And of course, the prettiest faces sometimes seem to draw the most viewers. And it strikes me as so odd when I see a 20-something on a cable station delivering foreign policy or economic news. It's just with the experience of a degree and that's it.
Yeah, we certainly have a lot of that today with the explosion of cable stations, the explosion of social media.
So when you go to get your daily dose of news, what do you do? Where do you look? How do you approach the day's events when you need news?
Well, that's a good question. The one thing I still read as a physical copy is the Wall Street Journal. I receive that, and sometimes I preempt getting the paper delivered and holding it in my hands by going online. They have a good website that you can get their news quickly by just getting it online. But I'm old enough that I'm probably not someone who consumes quite as much media through the internet, but I do. There's certain websites. I like to read the Free Press, some other Substack columns, and look online to get the latest news. But I tend to be a consumer of the Wall Street Journal, and because I think it covers uh, good news internationally and domestically. It has a good business news, which is harder to get these days, and I tend to enjoy their opinion pages as well. And then third, the final factor there is we have a number of programs that feed fellows into the opinion pages at the Wall Street Journal. So I like to see when they get published.
Oh, true. Yes. When you look at social media and the impact social media has, now X, I think, is the largest, if or one of the largest actual news sites out there. You look at X, you look at TikTok. Do you see those in terms of positives or negatives, and or somewhere in between?
I think it's somewhere in between. You can get certainly immediate commentary on things and sometimes immediate reporting. I do know too many people, I think, that are addicted to those kinds of things, and they're constantly wanting to get into, these fights with people over TikTok or especially over X. I've tried to temper my amount of time I spend on those things. I have people here who tell me I should be tweeting more often or posting on LinkedIn or Instagram, but I don't know if it's a generational thing or a sense of not wanting to just comment in short, 140 characters or whatever it is now that they limit you to on X. So I'll go to it occasionally, but I think it's engaged a lot of young people in ways that they were not engaged in the past, but it has to be used very judiciously.
Yeah, it's a good tool, I think, if you just want a quick rundown of the headlines. What's going on? What are people talking about? What's emerging as the breaking news? But as you said, too many people use that as their sole source, and who knows where
Yeah.
the X 27 characters or whatever are coming from. Today's news, do you think that bias is as much of a concern as, conservatives always cry about bias in the news, but is that as big a deal?
I'm afraid it is. I mean, it's both a sin of omission where things aren't covered that should be covered, and then there are things that they cover that aren't true. A lot of misinformation coming across, and I think a lot of it in the so-called legacy media is due to the bias of the people who do the reporting. There are some changes underway, but I still think there's a slant to things that on the news pages of major newspapers that comes across that is harmful. It's really important. We have a press in our country that is acting independently, that is bringing about accountability and transparency, especially in our government officials, that they're seeking and reporting the truth. But I still think you see a lot of bias in the way things are covered in the major media, and it's going to be slow to change. But I hope that this move by Jeff Bezos that you mentioned, Cheryl, about trying to promote a paper that's supporting personal liberties and free markets will bring about a change in that paper. I mean, Washington, D.C. is a company town. The company is big government and the administrative state, and for the Washington Post to try to break from that's going to be hard, but it's encouraging that the owner of the paper at least wants to try.
It is. And let's just finish up with a look at your piece that you had published mid-March in National Review. The mainstream media don't need media solidarity. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's that, the best example I would give that comes to mind is last year in late May, I think it was, or early June, the Wall Street Journal ran a news piece reporting on a lot of unnamed sources that said Biden's mental acuity was failing, that he was disconnected in meetings. And there was this media solidarity just attacking viciously the Wall Street Journal for that story and quoting people say, oh, the president's fine. They made this up. Nobody says the president's disconnected. The White House attacked it, but the news media attacked it. And it was just a wholesale attack on the Wall Street Journal. Well, a few weeks later, the Trump-Biden debate showed the country that Biden was suffering some loss of mental acuity. And so very quickly the media started to cover their own tracks, and I think Jake Tapper even wrote a book on this very subject that he was guilty of, covering up the president's health issues. So that's what we have to break out of, is this media solidarity that says we aren't going to cover the Biden laptop story, the Hunter Biden laptop story. We aren't going to comment on the president's health problems. And it's just this groupthink that dominated the media so much the last few years that we have to get away from.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And it was alternately astonishing and just laughable, the gaslighting that occurred after that.
Yeah, exactly.
The very same media, boom, the next day was saying the opposite. It was hilarious, really.
Yeah.
Roger,
That's right.
Roger Ream, just tell people where they can learn a little bit about the journalism fellowships that I'm part of, actually, for the Fund of American Studies.
Yes, at TFAS, we call it, tfas.org. You can learn about all our programs. We do programs for high school students, college students. We sponsor independent campus newspapers that have these great fellowships like the Robert Novak Journalism Fellowship and the Joseph Rago Fellowship. So young people interested in journalism careers can find our journalism programs there and find out how to attend them, get fellowships, and find a career in journalism. Yep. TFAS.org.
Extremely worthy as a recipient, firsthand, extremely worthy. I want to thank you, Roger, for all you do, and thank you so much for your time on Bold and Blunt. It was great to chat.
It's been a pleasure to talk with you, Cheryl. Thank you.
Make sure you check out that website, the Fund for American Studies. Great fellowship programs. I want to thank you for listening. Remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.